The conflict in Somalia during the early 1990s will forever go down as one of the biggest military failures in the history of the United States. What was initially supposed to just take a very short amount of time turned into a catastrophe, which is best known as the source material for the movie Black Hawk Down. It seems like a pretty weird inspiration for a video game, especially considering how these events are still relatively recent. Nevertheless, it was considered one of the most ambitious titles around when it was initially released. This is Delta Force Black Hawk Down for the Xbox. Delta Force Black Hawk Down places you in control of an elite soldier in the United States Army during the Somalia conflict. Missions are set up with a clear, usually humanitarian objective for you to assist with, such as protecting a food supply or destroying weapons crates. The scope of the game, like the events in Somalia during this time period, is much smaller than something you'd see in a Modern Warfare or Battlefield. The game's missions, unlike those games, actually seem a little more possible for a small group of soldiers. Black Hawk Down is a more tactical shooter than you might expect going in. It only takes 1 or 2 hits to kill you, and moving into position and flanking enemies is also really important. Weapons don't have that much recoil, but they also feel slightly inaccurate when aiming down the sights due to a certain stiffness they have. I also found it easier to aim from the hip when firing at all but the most distant targets. The control scheme also doesn't really do the game any favors. Clicking in the right stick is used for aiming, which is fine, but the left trigger switches weapons, the left stick jumps, and the D-pad is used for changing from crouch to prone. That's the one that can really throw you off, as there's no way to get to the D-pad without taking a hand off the sticks.
Watch the crossing and place weapons left, 50 meters! Go!
There were a few other things in this game that really had me scratching my head. AI, both enemy and ally, can amaze you and then have you staring in disgusted disbelief during the same few minutes. One mission had a few different soldiers and I moving past vehicles to take out targets, and the hostiles were taken down almost entirely by the other soldiers, but then I noticed my allies not even looking behind them as an enemy tried to shoot them in the back. Enemy AI's problem is mostly due to the fact that some of them will not move from their position to get a better shot at you, and this can take you out of the experience. Although it's no longer available due to the original Xbox Live shutting down, Black Hawk Down featured a 50-player multiplayer mode back when it was released. To be honest, you're not really missing all that much. The mode was interesting for the novelty of such big games, but it was also pretty bare bones compared to today's shooters. For an Xbox title, this game is also not that bad looking. Although plant life looks strangely flat, characters and buildings both have quite a bit of detail and effects are impressive. The helicopter sections also showcase an impressive draw distance. Although Delta Force Black Hawk Down has a fairly controversial premise, its gameplay actually isn't that out of the ordinary. It's not a bad game, but this is one that's probably best remembered for the ground it broke in its premise and now offline multiplayer than for the gameplay itself.